Have you ever caught a glimpse of someone familiar, a friend, a family member, maybe even yourself, only to realize a moment later that they could not have been there? In the quiet streets of our own neighborhoods, between the laughter of children at play and the hum of daily life, could there be something else walking among us, something that wears our faces, borrows our gestures, and slips away unnoticed? Imagine if the line between reality and the unknown was thinner than we thought, and someone crossed it when we least expected. I am Paul, and you are listening to Stories Philippines podcast.
You are listening to all new seasons of Stories Philippines podcast.
Not so long ago, in a small town in Pampanga, where the fields stretch out like green waves and the afternoon sun melts into a golden haze, three friends found themselves facing a mystery that would linger in their minds far longer than they ever expected. The story you're about to hear is not filled with terrifying monsters or shrill cries in the night. Instead, it is about something stranger and perhaps more unsettling, because it could happen to any of us. Today, we change the names of all people involved to protect their privacy. Our storyteller is Adrian Louis Garcia, but you can call him Adrian. His friends, Miguel Palo Santos and Simon Rafael Cruz. Three ordinary 12-year-olds living in a community where everyone knows everyone else and surprises rarely come knocking. Adrian's house was just a few houses away from Miguel's. Like most kids their age, they would meet up after chores, racing their bikes along the narrow streets, calling out to neighbors with the confidence of those who have never left the safety of home. That afternoon, in the early months of 2021, they had planned to visit their friend Simon, whose house stood at the end of their street near a cluster of acacia trees, tall, ancient sentinels that seemed to watch over the neighborhood. It was one of those humid afternoons, the kind that makes the air shimmer and the world feel slightly off balance. Adrian and Miguel arrived at Simon's gate, calling out his name. They didn't see him at first, so they peered through the window, just in time to see Simon, hair neatly tied back, carrying a plate towards his parents' bedroom. He didn't look at them, didn't wave. He just walked through the hallway, disappearing behind the door. Adrian nudged Miguel, puzzled. Why hadn't Simon said anything? He always greeted them, always eager to play. They waited, bouncing a rubber ball against the wall, their voices echoing in the stillness of the afternoon. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The house was quiet. The only sound was the distant call of a tricycle's horn and the gentle rustle of bamboo leaves. Suddenly, they heard footsteps behind them. They turned, and there was Simon, hair loose, holding a half-eaten snack. He grinned and asked why they looked so surprised. Adrian stammered, "Weren't you just inside? We saw you go into your parents' room." But Simon shook his head. "I just got back from the store," he replied. "I've been outside the whole time." A chill crept up Adrian's arms. He glanced at Miguel, whose face had gone pale. If that wasn't Simon they saw enter the room, who or what was it? Encounters like this are not uncommon in Filipino stories. Our islands are rich with tales of spirits and shapeshifters, of creatures who take the forms of those we know and trust. In the old Tagalog tongue, there is no direct word for doppelganger, but the idea is woven deep into our folklore. The muto, or ghost, sometimes appears as a loved one. The encanto might borrow a familiar face to lure the unwary. In the Visayan region, stories are whispered about the tawa tau, a spirit who mimics people to sow confusion. But the concept of seeing one's double is not unique to the Philippines. In Germany, the word doppelganger means double walker, a shadow self, an omen of misfortune. In Norse legends, the Vadager is a spirit that precedes a living person, performing their actions before they arrive. Across the world, from Ireland to Japan, cultures have stories about doubles, twins, and mysterious lookalikes. Sometimes they are seen as warnings, sometimes as protectors. As the afternoon faded into evening, Adrian, Miguel, and Simon tried to shake off the feeling that something was watching them from the shadows under the acacia trees. Their parents called them home for dinner, and the world returned to its familiar rhythm for a while. Submit your stories at storiesphilippines.com. We want to hear your experiences too. After a quick meal, Adrian hurried to rejoin his friends. He found Miguel and Simon waiting by the basketball court, their eyes fixed on the far end where the trees cast long, dark shadows. "What are you looking at?" Adrian called out. Miguel jumped. "You scared us," he said, his voice tight. "We just saw you go over there, into the dark." He pointed toward the trees. Adrian frowned. "I just finished eating," he replied. "I've been inside the whole time." The three friends stared at one another, fear prickling at their skin. The game was forgotten. The sun was setting, and the shadows stretched longer. They decided without another word to head home. That night, as Adrian lay in bed, the events of the day played over and over in his mind. Who or what had taken their place that afternoon? Was it a spirit, a trick of the light, or something else? The small town of San Rafael is not marked on tourist maps, but it is like thousands of other towns across the Philippines. Fields of rice and sugar cane, low-slung houses and narrow roads winding through coconut groves. At the heart of the town stands a centuries-old church, its bell tower rising above the rooftops. The locals say the land is old, older than the church, older even than the Spanish stone walls. Before the town was built, this was a place of gatherings, rituals, and offerings to unseen spirits. Beneath the acacia trees, children still play, but their elders tell them to be home before dark. The shadows, they say, are not always empty. Find show notes and support options in the description. Access exclusive content on Patreon. The days after that strange afternoon moved slowly, as if the air was thicker, heavier. Adrian, Miguel, and Simon tried to slip back into their routines, but the memory of their double lingered in the corners of their minds like a persistent shadow. Sometimes, Adrian found himself glancing at his reflection in the window, half expecting to see another face staring back. Simon became quieter. Miquel stopped cracking jokes. Their parents noticed their unease but chalked it up to growing pains, the kind of worries that come and go with adolescence. But for the three friends, something fundamental had shifted. The world no longer felt safe and predictable. There was an edge to everything, a silent warning that they could not quite explain. One afternoon, after classes ended, the boys met again under the acacia trees. The shade was cool, but the air was heavy with humidity. Simon brought up the encounter first, his voice barely a whisper. "Do you think we should tell someone?" he asked. "A priest, maybe? Or a healer?" Miguel shook his head. "They'll just say we imagined it, or that we made it up." Adrian looked at the ground, tracing circles in the dirt with his shoe. "But we all saw it. Twice. That has to mean something." Their conversation drifted to stories they had heard from older relatives, tales of spirits and creatures that mimicked the living, stories told in hushed voices around flickering candles. Simon's grandmother once spoke of a balbal, a creature said to disguise itself as a friend or family member. Miguel's older cousin believed in usog, a curse that could make someone ill if a spirit borrowed their likeness. These beliefs were old, older than the town itself. Filipino folklore is a living tapestry, woven with the fears and hopes of generations. The phenomenon of doubles, of seeing someone when you know they cannot be there, appears again and again in the stories passed down through families. In the Cordillera region, elders warn of the Anito, ancestral spirits who sometimes appear in the form of loved ones. Among the Tagalogs, there are stories of the Aikik, a bird that transforms into a human double to deliver warnings or omens. And in the Bicol region, the Aswang is said to take the shape of someone familiar to approach its victims unnoticed. These stories do not exist in isolation. Around the world, cultures have their own versions of the double. In Egypt, the Ka is a spiritual double, a vital force that lives on after death. In Ireland, the Fetch is a spectral double seen as an omen. In China, the Hund is a spirit that can leave the body and be seen elsewhere. The idea that we are not alone in our own skin, that something else can wear our face, is both ancient and universal. Follow us on social media for daily folklore facts and updates from the Stories Filipinas team. As the boys wrestled with their fear, they turned to the modern world for answers. Adrian searched online, finding forums filled with stories like theirs. People from all over the world described encounters with their doubles, sometimes harmless, sometimes terrifying. Psychologists have a name for the phenomenon: autocopy. It's a rare condition where a person sees their own image at a distance. Some scientists believe it is caused by disruptions in the brain's perception of the self, often triggered by stress or exhaustion. But this explanation did not satisfy Adrian. They all saw the same thing, at the same time. It wasn't just in his mind. Paranormal investigators have their own theories. In 2018, a group from the University of the Philippines conducted a survey on doppelganger sightings in rural areas. Their findings suggested that encounters like Adrian's were more common than people admitted. Most cases happened in places with strong oral traditions, where belief in spirits was still part of daily life. The investigators suggested that collective belief might make people more likely to see doubles, or, perhaps, that the spirits themselves are drawn to places where they are remembered. The local parish priest, Father Remigio, was known for his kindness and his willingness to listen. One Sunday after Mass, Adrian and his friends found the courage to approach him. They described what they had seen, careful not to reveal too much, afraid of being dismissed. Father Remigio listened quietly, then nodded. In the Bible, there are stories of angels taking human form, of spirits appearing as men and women. The Church teaches that each of us has a soul, unique and precious. But there are forces, good and evil, that can mimic what is familiar to us. He paused, choosing his words carefully. When you see something that shouldn't be there, it's a reminder that the world is mysterious. Not everything can be explained by science or by faith alone. Sometimes we are called to be careful, to pay attention to the things we cannot see. He blessed the boys, telling them to pray for protection and to trust their instincts if they ever felt threatened again. As the sun set over San Rafael, the fields glowed with a gentle light. Carabao grazed near the irrigation canal, and the smell of smoke drifted from kitchens as families prepared dinner. The acacia trees cast long shadows across the dusty road. The boys walked home together, their steps slow, their voices low. The town was alive with history, each house with its own stories, each street with its own secrets. Some said the land was restless, that the spirits who once watched over the rice fields had never left. Others believed that the past and present sometimes overlapped, and that on certain days, the veil between worlds grew thin enough for things to cross over. As Adrian reached his gate, he looked back at the trees. For a moment, he thought he saw movement, a flash of light, a shifting shadow. But when he blinked, it was gone. Access exclusive content on Patreon. Your support helps us share more stories like this. Night in San Rafael was rarely silent. Crickets sang in the grass, and the occasional bark of a dog echoed along the empty street. Adrian lay in bed, the thin curtains stirring in the breeze, and wondered if the world outside was truly as ordinary as it seemed. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw the image of Simon, hair tied back, a plate in hand, walking silently down the hallway, ignoring their calls. The memory clung to him, stubborn as a shadow. Rumors began to spread among the children in the neighborhood. Someone's younger brother claimed to have seen his mother sitting at the kitchen table, only to find her asleep in the bedroom moments later. An older girl whispered about a neighbor who saw her grandfather outside the gate, even though he had passed away years ago. The stories were like breadcrumbs, scattered through the town, leading nowhere and everywhere at once. Miguel became obsessed with finding answers. He started a notebook, jotting down every strange occurrence he heard about. He drew maps of the neighborhood, marking places where doubles had appeared. Under the acacia trees, near the old well behind Simon's house, at the corner by the sari-sari store. Patterns began to emerge. Most sightings happened at dusk, just as the sun slipped below the horizon. Simon, always the skeptic, suggested they try to catch the double on camera. One weekend, the three friends borrowed a phone and set up a video recording in the hallway where Simon's double had first appeared. They waited, holding their breath, the glow of the screen lighting their anxious faces. Hours passed. Nothing happened. The hallway remained empty. silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of a wall clock. Frustrated, they turned off the camera and played the footage back. There was nothing unusual. Only one brief moment when the lights flickered and a shadow moved across the wall, too fast to follow. "Maybe we're chasing something that doesn't want to be seen," Adrian said softly. As the days passed, the friends found comfort in the knowledge that their experience was not unique. In Russia, they learned tales of the Dvoynika double who appears before disaster were shared between families. In West Africa, the Yoruba people believed in the Ori, a spiritual twin that could influence one's destiny. In Japan, some whispered of the Ikiryo, a living ghost that leaves the body behind, sometimes seen by others at the very moment a strong emotion is felt. These stories crossed oceans and centuries, finding new forms in each culture, and yet, at the heart of every tale was a question. What does it mean to see yourself or someone you love in a place they cannot be? Is it a warning, a blessing, or something else entirely? Submit your stories at stories@philippines.com. Every story adds to our understanding of the unknown. Miguel's older sister Jade was studying psychology at university. One afternoon, she found the boys huddled around their notebook, whispering excitedly. Curious, she asked what they were up to. Reluctantly, they shared their story. Jade listened, then explained that the brain sometimes plays tricks on us, especially when we are tired, scared, or expecting to see something. There's a part of the brain called the temporal-parietal junction, she said. It helps us understand where our body is in space. If it gets confused, you might feel like you're seeing yourself from the outside or even see a double. But Adrian protested. How could we all see the same thing at the same time? Jade shrugged. Sometimes, fear is contagious. You expect to see something, and your brain fills in the gaps. But that doesn't mean it isn't real to you. The mind is powerful. Her explanation was comforting, but it did not erase the memory. The boys knew what they had seen. It was not just a shadow, not just a trick of the mind. It was something else. Father Remigio's words continued to echo in Adrian's mind. The priest had spoken of spirits, of good and evil, that could mimic the living. Some theologians believe that the soul is a reflection of God's image, unique and unrepeatable. But what happens when that reflection is copied, distorted? Is it a sign of spiritual danger, or simply a mystery beyond human understanding? In ancient Christian writings, there are stories of saints who saw visions of themselves, sometimes as warnings, sometimes as reassurance. In one tale, a monk saw his own double, praying in the chapel just as he was about to commit a grave mistake. He took it as a sign and changed his ways. In another, a nun saw her double in the garden and was filled with peace. Believing it was evidence of her guardian angel, Father Remigio encouraged the boys to pray and to trust in the goodness of God. If you ever see something you do not understand, he told them, remember that you are never alone. There are forces that protect us, just as there are those that wish to frighten us. As night deepened over San Rafael, the town grew quiet. Streetlights cast pale pools of light on the cracked pavement. The fields beyond the last row of houses were dark. The only sounds the distant croak of frogs and the lowing of cattle. It was easy in the darkness to imagine other worlds pressing close to our own. Worlds filled with spirits and shadows, with doubles and echoes. Adrian stood by his window, watching the moon rise above the rooftops. He whispered a prayer and for the first time in days felt a measure of peace. Find show notes and support options in the description. Your support helps us bring these stories to life. weeks rolled on. The rainy season arrived in San Rafael, coating the world in silver and green. Puddles formed on the quiet streets, and the scent of wet earth drifted through open windows. The three friends tried to carry on, but something had shifted in their friendship. Each was haunted in his own way, by questions, by memories, and by the knowledge that the ordinary could become extraordinary in a blink. One afternoon, the rain finally stopped, leaving the air cool and fresh. Adrian, Miguel, and Simon met again under the acacia trees, seeking comfort in each other's company. They decided to revisit the places where the doubles had appeared, hoping to find some clue or sign. The town felt different now, older, stranger. Even the birds seemed quieter, as if they too were watching. Their first stop was the old well behind Simon's house. It was ringed with mossy stones, its water dark and still. The well had stood there for generations, a silent witness to every secret and sorrow of the neighborhood. Simon's grandmother said that wells were gateways, places where the world above touched the world below. The boys peered into the depths, half hoping, half fearing that something would look back. They moved on to the narrow alley beside the Sari Sari store, where neighbors sometimes saw fleeting shadows at dusk. The walls were covered in graffiti, names and faces etched in fading paint. Adrian ran his fingers along the rough surface, feeling the grooves of forgotten stories. Finally, they stood beneath the acacia trees, their branches heavy with rain. Here the air was thick with memory. They remembered the first double, the quiet way it had slipped past them, unseeing and unseen. "Do you think it could happen again?" Miguel asked. Simon shrugged, but his eyes were wary. Maybe it never stopped. In Filipino tradition, when faced with a mystery, people often turn to ritual. Adrian's mother suggested they visit an albulario, a folk healer known for bridging the gap between worlds. Intrigued and desperate for answers, the boys agreed. The albulario, Mang Eligio, greeted them with a warm smile and a knowing look. His home was filled with the scent of herbs and candles, and the air hummed with quiet energy. He listened as the boys told their story, nodding thoughtfully. "There are spirits everywhere," Mang Eligio said. "Some kind, some mischievous. Sometimes they borrow our faces to remind us that we are not alone." He asked them to close their eyes while he murmured words in a language older than the town itself. He sprinkled water from a coconut shell and waved a bundle of burning sage around them. After the ritual, Mang Eligio pressed a small pouch into each boy's hand. "Keep this with you," he said. "It will protect you from anything that means harm." The boys thanked him, feeling lighter, but still uncertain. Access exclusive content on Patreon. Hear more stories of healers, rituals, and the unseen. San Rafael's history is long and tangled. Before the Spanish built their church, before the first rice fields were planted, the land belonged to the E10, the region's earliest settlers. They believed in spirits of sky and earth, in ancestors who watched over the living. When the Spaniards arrived, they built stone houses and planted acacia trees, believing the trees would protect the town from evil. Over the centuries, the town changed hands many times, from Spanish friars to American soldiers, from Japanese scouts to local farmers. Each new wave of people brought their own stories, their own spirits. Some say the land remembers every footstep, every prayer, every secret. Geographers have noted that San Rafael sits at a crossroads of old trade routes, where rivers and roads converge. In many cultures, crossroads are places of power, where the boundaries between worlds are thin. Perhaps this is why the town is so full of stories, why doubles and shadows walk here more often than in other places. Months after the boys' first encounter, a team of paranormal investigators from Manila visited San Rafael. They had heard rumors of strange sightings and wanted to document them for their online channel. With permission from local officials, they set up infrared cameras and audio recorders near the acacia trees in the old well. Their instruments picked up odd fluctuations, cold spots where the air should have been warm, voices too faint to understand. One camera recorded a brief, blurry image of a figure walking behind the church at midnight. When they played the footage for the townspeople, no one recognized the face. The investigators interviewed Adrian, Miguel, and Simon, asking careful questions about what they saw. They explained that doppelganger sightings often occurred in places with strong emotional energy. Some believe doubles are echoes, Bowen investigators said, like footprints left behind by powerful memories or unresolved feelings. San Rafael's landscape is a patchwork of old and new. Modern houses stand beside bamboo huts, and busy roads cross ancient footpaths. The townspeople say that on certain nights, especially during the rainy season, you can hear footsteps in the grass, soft, measured, as if someone is walking beside you just out of sight. The acacia trees are the tallest in the province, their roots twisting deep into the earth. Elderly residents claim the trees are older than the church itself, planted during a time when people still made offerings to the spirits of the land. During festivals, children hang paper lanterns from the branches, hoping to please whatever dwells there. As the weeks turned to months, the boys grew older, their fear fading into curiosity. Doubles never appeared again, but their presence lingered, in the hush of the trees, in the quiet moments before sleep, in the stories whispered between friends. Sometimes, Adrian wondered if the doubles had been a warning, a message, or just a mystery that would remain unsolved. He learned to live with the question, to accept that not every story has an ending. Follow us on social media for daily folklore facts and updates. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest memories. Adrian, Miguel, and Simon found themselves slowly returning to the rhythms of their lives: school, chores, basketball games, and birthday parties. Yet, the story of the doubles became a secret thread woven into their friendship. Every now and then, a strange noise or an unexpected flash of movement would make them exchange quick, knowing glances, a silent reminder of what they had witnessed. Adrian started writing down his dreams. Sometimes he dreamed of walking through town at dusk, only to see his own face pass by him without a word. In other dreams, the doubles stood just beyond the reach of light, waiting for something he could not name. He shared his dreams with the others, and sometimes they nodded, admitting that they too saw echoes of themselves in the shadows. As the boys entered their teenage years, the story faded into the background. A campfire tale, a dare whispered during sleepovers, but deep down, they carried it with them, a reminder that the world was bigger and stranger than it seemed. Filipino elders often say that seeing your own double is a warning. Some believe it means death is near, while others say it is simply a sign to be cautious, to pay attention to the choices you make. These beliefs echo across cultures. In Scotland, the wraith is a vision seen before a person's death. In India, some Hindus believe that seeing your chaya, or shadow self, is a sign from the gods to change your ways. Adrian's grandfather, Lolo Ernesto, told him a story from his own childhood. He had seen his older brother standing by the river one morning, only to find him asleep in bed moments later. A week later, his brother fell seriously ill but recovered. Lolo Ernesto always believed that the double was a spirit, offering a silent warning, a chance to prepare for what was to come. Find show notes and support options in the description. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Years later, when Adrian was in high school, he found a podcast episode about doppelgangers while scrolling through his phone late at night. The host interviewed people from all over the world: doctors, scientists, priests, and ordinary folks who had seen their own doubles. Some described it as terrifying, others as strangely peaceful. A neuroscientist explained how certain brain injuries could cause people to see themselves from the outside, a phenomenon known as hiagopa. But even she admitted that science could not explain why groups of people sometimes witnessed the same double at the same time. A priest from Mexico shared that the church had no official position on doubles, but he believed that such experiences were reminders of the soul's journey, echoes from another world, or perhaps glimpses of a reality just beyond our own. Adrian emailed the podcast, sharing his story. The host replied, thanking him and adding his experience to a growing archive of unexplained encounters from across the globe. For Adrian, the most important lesson was that it was okay not to have all the answers. Sometimes the mind creates mysteries to help us process the things we fear or do not understand. Other times, the world simply is more mysterious than we want to admit. Talking about the doubles helped Adrian and his friends feel less alone. They learned that sharing fear did not make it smaller, but it made it easier to carry. Their story became a way to connect with each other, with their families, and with strangers who had seen strange things too. San Rafael changed as the years passed. New houses sprang up where rice fields once stood. The old church was renovated, its bell tower shining bright under the midday sun. The acacia trees remained, sturdy and silent, their branches stretching over the street like guardians. Some of the elders moved away or passed on, and with them went many of the old stories. But the land remembered. Children still played under the trees, and sometimes, at dusk, someone would claim to have seen a familiar face where none should have been. The well behind Simon's house was covered with a new slab of concrete, but the stories lingered. People still avoided walking there at night just in case the shadows were not empty. Father Remigio retired, replaced by a younger priest who was more interested in community projects than in tales of spirits. Still, the church remained a place of comfort. Adrian sometimes sat in the back pew, listening to the echo of his footsteps on the marble floor, thinking about the thin places in the world where faith and mystery met. He read old books about saints and miracles, stories of visions and warnings. He found comfort in the idea that not all mysteries were meant to be solved. Some were invitations to wonder, to hope, to remember that the world was full of hidden meaning. That the world was holy, full of hidden meaning. Submit your stories at storiesphilippines.com and help us keep Filipino folklore alive for the next generation. As Adrian prepared to leave San Rafael for university in the city, he walked one last time under the acacia trees with Miguel and Simon. The air was thick with nostalgia. They talked about old times, about the doubles they had seen and the lives they hoped to build. "It's strange," Simon said. "I used to be afraid of what we saw. Now I think it made me braver." Miguel looked up at the trees, their leaves rustling in the wind. "Whatever it was, it's a part of us now." Adrian smiled. "Maybe that's all a story really is. A way to remember the things we can't explain. Access exclusive content on Patreon. Every member helps us share more stories of the unknown." Adrian's move to the city was both thrilling and overwhelming. Manila was a world apart from San Rafael. Endless lights and noise, towers of glass and steel, crowds that flowed like rivers through the streets. But in his quiet moments, Adrian found himself thinking back to the old trees and the silent, watchful shadows of his childhood. He made new friends at university, people from all over the Philippines and even from other countries. When the topic of hometown legends came up in late-night conversations, Adrian hesitated. Would anyone believe his story about doubles in a small, forgotten town? One evening, after his roommate from Baguio shared a tale about a white lady on Kenan Road, Adrian decided to tell his own story. He described the afternoon with Simon and Miguel, the double walking silently into the parents' room, the second encounter in the shadows, the fear that followed, and the way the mystery lingered for years. To his surprise, his friends listened intently. A classmate from Mindanao said he had heard similar stories from his grandmother. Someone from Cebu mentioned tales of the Sigbin, a creature said to mimic the voices and forms of people at hunts. For the first time, Adrian realized that his story was not just his own. It was part of a larger tradition, a web of folklore spanning the islands and beyond. It was a comfort to know he was not alone. In class, Adrian learned about world literature and was struck by how many cultures shared the idea of the double. In Latin America, the Naul is a shapeshifter who can take the form of people or animals. In the United States, urban legends tell of phantom hitchhikers who appear on lonely roads only to vanish without a trace. In Africa, some tribes fear the Tokoloshe, a mischievous spirit that takes on familiar forms to cause confusion. The stories differed in detail but shared a common thread, the idea that identity is not fixed, that the boundary between self and other is porous. Sometimes a double is a warning, sometimes it is a trickster, a test, or a guide. Adrian's interest in the science behind such stories grew. He read about mirror neurons, cells in the brain that allow us to imitate others, to feel empathy, to see ourselves in someone else's shoes. Some scientists believe that these neurons help explain why doubles are such a powerful image in folklore and psychology. He also studied cases of Capgras syndrome, a rare condition where people are convinced their loved ones have been replaced by imposters. The mind, it seems, is capable of creating its own doubles, even without the help of spirits or shadows. But even as he learned more, Adrian felt that something remained unsolved. Science could explain some things, but not the feeling he and his friends had experienced. The cold certainty that they had seen something impossible, something that looked back at them with their own eyes. Find show notes and support options in the description. Share your own stories of doubles, shadows, and mysterious encounters. During school breaks, Adrian visited San Rafael. The town seemed smaller every time, but the acacia trees were as tall as ever. The new generation of kids played in the same streets, inventing new games, telling new stories. Adrian sometimes heard them whisper about shadows at dusk, or a face glimpsed in a window where no one should have been. He walked with Simon and Miguel, now both taller and older, their voices deeper but their friendship unchanged. They visited the old well, the now dormant Sari Sari store, the church that still rang its bells every Sunday morning. Life had moved on, but the memories stayed rooted, like the trees themselves. Simon planned to become a teacher. Miguel dreamed of starting his own business. Adrian wanted to write, to record the stories that might otherwise be forgotten. One afternoon, Adrian attended Mass at the church with his mother. The new priest, Father Benedicto, gave a homily about the mystery of faith, how not everything in life can be explained, and how sometimes our unanswered questions are gifts that keep us humble and curious. After the service, Adrian approached Father Benedicto and asked about stories of doubles and spirits. The priest smiled and said, "In every culture, people see things they cannot explain. Sometimes it is a message from God or the saints. Sometimes it is simply a reminder that we are not as in control as we think. He added, "Do not be afraid of what you do not understand. Let it remind you to be grateful for what you do know and to stay open to wonder." Follow us on social media for daily folklore facts. Join our community of storytellers and listeners. Adrian realized then that the story of the double had shaped him in ways he had never expected. It had taught him to look twice, to listen more closely, to respect the boundaries between what is seen and unseen. It had made him a storyteller, not just of his own life, but of the lives and dreams of those who came before him. He thought of the listeners who might be hearing this story now. Someone walking home at dusk, someone sitting with friends under tall trees, someone lying awake at night, wondering if the world is stranger than they imagine. To everyone who has seen something they cannot explain, Adrian offers this: you are not alone. Your story matters. And somewhere, someone else is listening. Submit your stories at storiesphilippines.com or access exclusive content on Patreon. Help us keep these mysteries alive. The years passed. Adrian and his friends finished school, started jobs, and built new lives. But the story of the doubles never faded. When they gathered for reunions in San Rafael, the memory always surfaced, sometimes as a joke, sometimes as a serious question that hovered over late-night conversations. One rainy evening, as thunder echoed in the distance, Adrian sat with Simon and Miguel on the porch of Miguel's house. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and the sound of raindrops drumming on the roof. Adrian brought up the old story, his voice soft but steady. "Do you ever wonder if we'll see them again?" he asked. Simon shook his head, but his eyes were thoughtful. "Maybe we only saw them because we were children, more open, less sure of what was possible," Miguel added. "Or maybe they're always around, but we've learned to stop looking." The three friends sat in silence, listening to the rain. The town felt unchanged, and yet everything was different. Children's laughter floated through the air, and somewhere, a dog barked at a shadow just beyond the light. San Rafael, like so many towns across the Philippines, balanced old beliefs with new realities. The internet brought news from faraway places, but the stories that mattered most were still told face to face, around kitchen tables and under the acacia trees. During the town's annual fiesta, elders shared tales of aswang, kapra, and tikbalang with the younger generation. Adrian noticed that the story of doubles had now joined their ranks. Children dared each other to look into mirrors at midnight, to walk past the old well in the dark, to watch for shadows that might not belong to anyone at all. Folklore evolved, but it survived, because it answered questions that science, faith, and reason sometimes could not. Few years after the first investigators visited San Rafael, another group arrived, this time with more advanced equipment. Thermal cameras, electromagnetic field meters, and audio recorders that could pick up sounds beyond the range of human hearing. They set up again near the acacia trees, the old well, and the church. The team invited Adrian and his friends to join them. They stayed up late, watching the monitors, hoping for a glimpse of something extraordinary. The investigators explained that many cultures believe places with long histories, especially those at crossroads or near water, were hotspots for unexplained phenomena. One of the researchers, Dr. Joaquin Morales, who had studied doppelganger sightings around the world, he explained, "What you experienced is not unique. It happens in places where memory is strong and where people are willing to listen. Sometimes the land remembers for us." Their equipment picked up a few odd readings, sudden drops in temperature, strange blips of static on the audio, but nothing as clear as a double. Dr. Morales reminded them that the most important stories were not always captured on camera. Later that night, Adrian reflected on how the story had changed over time. What began as a frightening mystery had become a source of connection, a way to understand himself, his friends, and his hometown. He read articles about the psychology of shared experiences. Studies showed that when people undergo something extraordinary together, it binds them in ways that last a lifetime. Memory is shaped by emotion, by the desire to make sense of the world, and by the stories we tell each other. In many ways, the double was no longer just a shadow in the hallway or a face in the dark. It was a symbol, a reminder that we are always more than we appear, that our lives are full of echoes and layers, of things seen and unseen. Find show notes and support options in the description. Your support allows us to bring more stories to listeners everywhere. San Rafael continued to grow. New shops opened along the highway and the town plaza was renovated with bright lights and benches. But the old places remained. The acacia trees still casting long shadows, the well still hidden behind Simon's house, the church still ringing its bells for weddings and funerals. Adrian noticed how the landscape seemed to hold memories, not just for him, but for everyone who had ever lived there. The stories of the doubles, the spirits, and the shadows were part of the town's identity, woven into its very foundation. He remembered something Dr. Morales said: "Stories are the way we make sense of what we cannot explain. They are maps that guide us through the unknown." On his last night before returning to the city, Adrian visited the church alone. He sat in the cool, dim interior, listening to the faint echo of his footsteps. He thought of all the questions he still carried, about faith, about science, about the mysteries that would never be solved. He realized that not knowing was not a failure. It was part of being human. To live with mystery was to live with hope, to trust that some questions were meant to remain open. As he left the church, Adrian felt a sense of peace. The world was vast and strange, but it was also beautiful, filled with stories waiting to be told. Submit your stories at storiesphilippines.com and join us on Patreon for exclusive content and behind-the-scenes updates. Today, Adrian lives far from San Rafael, in a bustling city where stories are traded as easily as coin, yet every so often he remembers those humid afternoons. The laughter of friends under the acacia trees, and the chill of seeing something he could not explain. The story of the double is never far from his mind, surfacing in quiet moments or when he catches his reflection in a window and wonders for just a second if it's really him. He has become, in his own way, a keeper of stories. At parties or over coffee, he listens to friends and strangers share tales of things that don't fit easily into the world of logic and daylight. Sometimes, he tells his own story. The story of the double that changed how he saw the world. Each time he finds that it draws out more stories: a cousin who saw a grandfather's ghost, a friend who dreamed of a lost sibling just before waking the bad news, a neighbor who glimpsed a child in a doorway, only to discover the child was still outside playing. Adrian notices that the details change, but the heart of each tale is the same. A brush with the unknown, a moment when reality wavers and something else steps in. He has learned to treasure these stories, not for the answers they offer, but for the questions they keep alive. The story of the double is not just about fear or curiosity. It is about the ways we try to understand ourselves, our communities, and the invisible lines that connect us. In the city, surrounded by millions of people, Adrian sometimes feels the presence of his old friends and his younger self, as if they are all walking together along the same path. He wonders if every person has a double somewhere, a reflection of their hopes, their regrets, their memory. Perhaps the doubles are not spirits at all, but reminders to pay attention. to notice the world more closely. Perhaps they are the stories we leave behind, echoes that linger in the places we have loved. At Stories Philippines Podcast, we believe that every story matters. Whether you have encountered something strange, heard a tale from your elders, or simply wonder about the mysteries around you, your voice is welcome here. Submit your stories at storiesphilippines.com. Find show notes and support options in the description below. Access exclusive content on Patreon, where you can listen to bonus episodes, interviews, and special features. Follow us on social media for daily folklore facts and updates from the team. If you ever find yourself passing through a small town like San Rafael, take a moment to listen to the wind in the trees or the silence just after sunset. Notice the way the light shifts, the shadows gather. The world grows just a little softer at the edges. You may not see a double or hear a voice from another world, but you will be part of the landscape, part of the story that continues to unfold. Remember, the land remembers. The stories we tell become part of the place, shaping it for those who come after us. And sometimes, when the air is still and the sky grows dark, the stories whisper back. So we end tonight's episode not with answers, but with questions. What does it mean to see yourself or someone you love where they cannot be? Are doubles warnings, guardians, or simply echoes of a world we can barely understand? Do they walk with us always, or only when we are young and the world is new? As Adrian learned sometimes, the most important thing is not to solve the mystery, but to share the story, to listen, to remember, and to wonder. As the Filipino poet once wrote, we are the children of stories, the keepers of old names. In every shadow a memory, in every silence a song, or as an old saying goes, the world is wide, but our stories bring us home. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, be sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share this podcast with friends and family. Our stories grow stronger every time you listen and every time you share your own. Support Stories Filipinos podcast financially in any way you can. Details are in the show notes. Every donation, membership, and kind word helps us bring you more tales of folklore, history, and the paranormal, blending our past with the mysteries of today. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the unknown. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your heart curious. This is Paul, and you've been listening to Stories Philippines Podcast. We'll see you in the next story, wherever the shadows may lead.